Velkara stood at the observation window of Bastion 7, watching the strange human military station rotate slowly in the darkness of space. The structure looked rough and ugly compared to the beautiful designs of the Coalition fleet. Everything about it seemed basic and crude. Large weapons pointed outward in all directions. Thick armor covered every surface. This was not a station built for beauty. This was a station built for war. She had studied humans for 3 months before coming here. The report said they were a young species barely 200 years into space travel. They had joined the Coalition only 3 years ago, eager and grateful for the chance to join the galactic community. On paper, they seemed harmless. Emotional, yes. Primitive in many ways, but not dangerous. The war with the Void Swarm had changed everything. The ancient enemy had returned, consuming worlds and fleets with terrifying speed. Every Coalition species had sent their best warriors to fight. Even the humans, despite their inexperience, had offered to help. The Coalition commanders had politely placed them in support roles, far from the real fighting. No one wanted to see the primitives get hurt. Velkara's mission was simple. Observe the human military, document their capabilities, write a report for the Coalition command. Standard procedure for all member species? Nothing complicated. The door behind her opened with a soft hiss. A tall human in a dark uniform walked in. His face carried lines and scars that spoke of old battles. His eyes were cold and calculating, measuring her in an instant. "Observer Velkara," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "I am Commander Deho. Welcome to Bastion 7. I will be your guide during your stay here." Velkara studied him carefully. Most species greeted visitors with warmth and enthusiasm. Humans seemed different. Deho's politeness felt like a mask covering something darker underneath. "Thank you, Commander," she replied. "I look forward to learning about your military traditions." Deho gave her a thin smile. "Of course. Though I must warn you, our methods may seem unusual to Coalition observers. We developed our tactics in isolation, without guidance from more advanced species." The tour began in the training halls. Velkara watched human soldiers practice combat maneuvers. They moved fast and aggressive, training with live ammunition in zero gravity. When one soldier made a mistake and nearly got hit by weapons fire, the others barely reacted. They simply adjusted their positions and continued. "You allow live fire during training?" Velkara asked, shocked. "What if someone gets killed?" Deho looked at her with those cold eyes. Then they were not good enough to survive real combat. Better to learn that here than facing the enemy. This was madness. Coalition training used simulations and safety protocols. No species risked their soldiers in practice. But the humans seemed to accept death as a teaching tool. In the weapons bay, Velkara saw technology that impressed and disturbed her. Humans had developed incredibly powerful weapons for such a young species. Missiles that could crack planets. Energy weapons that burned hotter than stars. Bombs that could destroy entire fleets. "Why do you need such destructive weapons?" she asked. "The Coalition provides standard armaments for all members." A younger officer nearby laughed quietly. Deho silenced him with a look. "We prefer to be prepared for any situation, observer. Our history taught us that survival requires overwhelming force." That evening, Velkara requested access to human historical databases. What she found made her feel cold inside. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire existence. Thousands of wars, millions of battles, billions of dead. They had invented weapons specifically designed to kill other humans. They had developed strategies for destroying cities, breaking spirits, and forcing surrender through terror. One file particularly disturbed her. It described something humans called total war. The concept was simple and horrible. Destroy everything the enemy needs to survive. Kill their soldiers. Burn their food. Poison their water. Break their will to resist. Accept no limits. Show no mercy. No Coalition species had ever practiced such barbarism. Wars, when they happened, followed strict rules. Civilians were protected. Infrastructure was preserved. Conflicts ended when one side surrendered. The idea of deliberately targeting everything and everyone was unthinkable. Yet humans had done this to each other. Repeatedly. For thousands of years. The next day, Deho took her to observe a tactical exercise. Captain Minji led a strike team through a simulated enemy station. Velkara expected to see standard boarding tactics. Clear the corridors. Secure key locations. Minimize casualties. Instead, Minji's team moved like predators. They set traps in dark corners. They sabotaged life support systems. They planted false communications to confuse defenders. When they encountered simulated enemies, they did not just eliminate them. They positioned the bodies to create psychological terror for anyone who found them. After the exercise, Velkara spoke with Minji privately. Your tactics seem designed to create fear, not just achieve objectives. Minji smiled, but the expression did not reach her eyes. Fear is a weapon, observer. A frightened enemy makes mistakes. A terrified enemy surrenders without fighting. Why waste lives in direct combat when psychology can win battles? The Coalition considers such methods unethical, Velkara said carefully. The Coalition has never faced extinction, Minji replied, her voice suddenly hard. We have, multiple times. We learned that survival requires using every advantage, every weapon, every tactic available. Ethics are a luxury for species who have never truly been threatened. That night, Velkara met with Admiral Taiwan in his private office. The old human looked tired, carrying the weight of command like a physical burden. Maps of the war covered his walls. Reports of Coalition defeat stacked on his desk. You seem disturbed by what you have seen, observer, Taiwan said, pouring her a drink. I am confused, Velkara admitted. Your people seem capable and disciplined. But your methods are so different from Coalition standards. Some would call them barbaric. Taiwan nodded slowly. We know how we appear to others. We understand that our history makes us seem violent and dangerous. But understand this, observer. We fight under Coalition rules because we choose to, not because we must. We follow your protocols out of respect, not necessity. What do you mean? Velkara asked. The Admiral looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death. I mean that we are holding back. Every human ship in this fleet is fighting with restrictions. We use weapons designed to disable, not destroy. We follow engagement rules that prioritize enemy survival. We accept higher casualties to protect Coalition sensibilities. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. If the day comes when those restrictions are removed, observer, you will see what humanity is truly capable of, and I pray to whatever gods are listening that you never have to witness that day. Velkara left the meeting feeling more unsettled than ever. She had come to Bastion 7 expecting to observe primitive warriors playing at war. Instead, she had found something far more disturbing. A species that understood violence on a fundamental level. A people who had turned warfare into an art form through necessity and survival. As she prepared her preliminary report that night, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed. Soldiers ran to battle stations with practiced efficiency. The Void Swarm had broken through Coalition defenses. They were coming, and Velkara was about to see if Admiral Taiwan's warning had been a threat or a promise. The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Officers shouted coordinates and status reports. Screens displayed incoming enemy signatures. Hundreds of red dots moving like a swarm of insects toward Coalition positions. Velkara gripped the railing of the observation platform, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The Void Swarm had hit 3 Coalition defensive lines simultaneously. Ships from 6 different species fought desperately to hold their positions, but the enemy moved with terrifying coordination, attacking weak points, overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers. Commander Diho stood at the central tactical display, his face calm despite the disaster unfolding before them. Status of human fleet? He asked quietly. Lieutenant Hajun checked his console. All ships at battle stations, Commander. Weapons charged. Crews ready. Awaiting orders. Deploy according to Coalition protocols, Diho ordered. Support positions only. Defensive formations. Minimum force engagement. Velkara noticed something strange in his voice. The words were correct, following Coalition rules perfectly. But underneath she heard reluctance, frustration, like a predator forced to hunt with its claws bound. The human fleet moved into position with impressive precision. 50 warships, each one bristling with weapons and armor. They formed a defensive wall behind Coalition forces, providing covering fire and shield support. Exactly what the battle plan called for. For 2 hours, the battle raged. The Void Swarm pressed forward relentlessly. Their ships were biological nightmares, grown rather than built, designed for one purpose: consume and spread. They attacked without fear, without hesitation, willing to sacrifice 100 ships to destroy 1 Coalition vessel. Coalition forces fought bravely, but ineffectively. Their tactics assumed a rational enemy, an opponent who valued their own survival, an adversary who would retreat when losses became too heavy. The swarm did none of these things. They simply kept coming, wave after wave after wave. Coalition flagship has fallen. Someone shouted. Admiral Krentok is dead. Panic rippled through the command center. Without unified leadership, coalition forces began falling into disarray. Ships retreated without coordination. Defensive lines collapsed. What had been an organized defense became a chaotic rout. Deho touched his communicator. Admiral Taewon requesting permission to advance and cover the retreat. The Admiral's voice came back immediately. Denied, Commander. Coalition Command has ordered all forces to fall back to the secondary defensive line. Maintain current protocols. Velkara watched human ships hold position even as coalition vessels fled past them. The swarm turned their full attention to these new targets. Within minutes, human shields began taking massive damage. Ships that had seemed so powerful now buckled under overwhelming assault. A human destroyer exploded, torn apart by swarm biomissiles. Another lost engines and began drifting. Hajun's voice cracked slightly as he reported, Commander, we have taken 17% casualties. If we hold this position much longer, I know, Lieutenant, Deho said softly. His hands gripped the console edge so hard his knuckles turned white. Hold position. Follow orders. Velkara could not understand it. Why did they stay? Why did they die following coalition rules when those rules were clearly not working? Pride, duty, or something else? The swarm adapted their tactics, just as coalition intelligence had warned they would. They stopped attacking human shields directly. Instead, they flowed around the human defensive line, pursuing the fleeing coalition ships, a hunting pack chasing wounded prey. Deho slammed his fist on the console. Enough of this. He opened a direct channel to Admiral Taewon. Sir, coalition forces are being slaughtered. Request permission to engage with full capabilities. A long pause, then Taewon's grave voice. Commander, you know what you are asking. Yes, sir. I am asking permission to save lives. To do what we were trained to do. Coalition Command will never approve. They fear us more than they fear the swarm. Then perhaps it is time they saw why they should fear us, Admiral. Request denied or approved? Another pause. Velkara held her breath. She knew something important was about to happen. Something that would change everything. Request approved, Commander Deho. Transmit protocol unchained to all human vessels. Weapons free. Doctrines unrestricted. Show them what humanity can do when we stop holding back. Deho straightened. His face changed. The careful diplomat vanished, replaced by something cold and terrible. A warrior without chains. All human ships, this is Commander Deho. Protocol Unchained is now active. I say again, Protocol Unchained is active. Remove all engagement restrictions. Authorization code Tango Whiskey 77. Execute. The change was immediate and shocking. Human ships that had been retreating slowly suddenly stopped. Their weapon signatures changed. New systems came online, systems that had been powered down and hidden. The whole fleet seemed to transform in seconds. Captain Minji's voice came over the command channel and Velkara heard excitement in it. Wild, fierce joy. Strike Force Alpha, weapons free. Beginning attack run. Target everything that moves. Minji's ships dove into the swarm formation like knives, but they did not fight like the coalition forces had. They did not try to preserve enemy ships or minimize destruction. They simply killed. Efficiently, brutally. Without hesitation. New weapons appeared. Missiles that split into hundreds of smaller warheads, each one seeking a different target. Energy beams that cut through multiple swarm ships in a single sweep. Bombs that created cascading chain reactions, turning enemy formations into fields of expanding debris. But the weapons were only part of it. The tactics changed too. Human ships stopped fighting defensively. They attacked weak points ruthlessly. They used destroyed enemy vessels as shields. They detonated their own damaged ships when enemies got too close, turning retreat into weapon. Specialist Yuna's team deployed something Velkara had never seen before. Small drones that attached to swarm ships and began broadcasting signals. Not random noise. Captured enemy communications, modified and replayed to create confusion and false orders. The swarm, which had been coordinating perfectly moments before, suddenly fractured. Ships turned on each other. Formations broke apart. The perfect hive mind seemed to develop blind spots and contradictions. What are they doing? Velkara whispered, horrified and fascinated. Hajun answered without taking his eyes from his console. Psychological warfare, observer. We are not just fighting the swarm, we are breaking them, making them doubt, making them afraid. But the swarm does not feel fear. They are a hive mind. Everything feels fear when it is dying, observer. Even hive minds. The battle turned in minutes. The swarm, which had been winning decisively, suddenly found itself outmatched. Human ships moved with perfect coordination, supporting each other, creating killing zones that enemy vessels could not escape. Daiho watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Every human ship moved exactly where he needed it, when he needed it there. It was like watching a single organism with 50 bodies all working toward one purpose: destruction. The swarm began retreating, not an organized withdrawal, a rout. They fled in panic, abandoning damaged ships, breaking formation, running from an enemy that terrified them more than death. "Should we pursue, Commander?" Hajun asked. Daiho considered, then shook his head. "No, let them run. Let them tell the rest of the swarm what they faced here today. Fear is a weapon, Lieutenant, and we just gave them a reason to fear humanity." Velkara stared at the aftermath. In less than 30 minutes, human forces had accomplished what coalition fleets could not do in hours. They had broken the swarm, driven them away, won a battle that should have been impossible, but the cost showed in the faces around her. Human officers looked satisfied but not happy, victorious but not celebratory, like they had done something necessary but unpleasant. Daiho turned to face her. "Now you have seen us fight without restrictions, observer. I hope you understand why we prefer not to." Velkara had no words. She had witnessed something both magnificent and terrible, a species that had turned warfare into an art form, a people who could unleash such destruction and still maintain control. And she realized with growing dread that this was only the beginning. The Coalition Council met in emergency session 3 days after the battle. Representatives from 15 species filled the grand chamber, their voices raised in heated debate. Velkara sat in the observer section, watching the chaos unfold. Some praised humanity for saving coalition forces. Others condemned their brutal methods. But all of them were afraid. Velkara could see it in their eyes, hear it in their voices. They had invited wolves into their peaceful garden, and now the wolves had shown their teeth. Admiral Taewon stood before the council, his posture rigid and formal. His uniform bore no decorations, no marks of pride, just simple dark fabric that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. "You violated coalition engagement protocols," the council speaker declared. "You deployed forbidden weapons. You used tactics we banned centuries ago. Explain yourself, Admiral." Taewon's voice remained calm. "I saved 3,000 coalition lives. Ships that would have been destroyed made it to safety, because human forces held the line. Is survival not more important than protocol? You created terror. You destroyed enemy vessels with excessive force. You deployed psychological warfare against a hive mind. I won a battle you were losing. Forgive me if I used effective tactics instead of dying politely." The chamber erupted in arguments. Half the council demanded human forces be placed under strict supervision. The other half insisted humanity be given operational independence. No one could agree on anything except that humans were dangerous. Finally, the speaker raised a hand for silence. "The council will vote on your request for full operational autonomy. Until then, human forces will return to support roles only." Taewon's face hardened. "Then the council should know that I cannot guarantee human forces will remain effective under such restrictions. My soldiers fight to win. If you tie their hands, they cannot save you." "Is that a threat, Admiral?" "It is a fact. The swarm does not care about your protocols. They will not fight fairly because you ask them to. Either let us fight properly or withdraw our forces entirely. I will not watch my people die following rules that guarantee defeat." The council voted. It took 6 hours of debate. In the end, fear of losing human military support outweighed fear of human methods. Barely. The vote passed by 3 members. Humanity had full operational autonomy. No restrictions, no oversight, complete freedom to wage war as they saw fit. Velkara wondered if the coalition had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. Within days, Operation Hellfire began. Commander Daiho briefed his officers in a secure chamber deep inside Bastion 7. Velkara attended, still serving as official observer. Though she no longer pretended to be documenting standard procedures, Daiho pointed to a star map covered in red markers. Intelligence indicates 3 major swarm breeding grounds in this sector. Each one produces roughly 10,000 bioships per standard cycle. As long as these facilities exist, the swarm can replace losses faster than we can inflict them. Coalition forces attempted to attack these locations 4 times, he continued. Each time, heavy defensive concentrations forced them back. The Council decided direct assault was too costly and shifted to containment strategy. Captain Minji leaned forward. Containment is surrender in slow motion. We need to destroy the source, not just fight symptoms. Agreed, Deho said, which is why we are going to eliminate all 3 breeding grounds simultaneously. Lieutenant Hajun has identified weaknesses in their defensive patterns. Specialist Yuna has designed weapons specifically to destroy organic infrastructure. We strike in 72 hours. The briefing continued for hours. Velkara listened to humans planning destruction on a scale that made her sick. They discussed acceptable casualty rates, optimal weapon yields for maximum infrastructure damage, psychological impact of sudden, overwhelming assault. They spoke of death and destruction the way other species discussed farming or trade. Clinical, professional, without emotion. After the briefing, she approached Deho privately. Commander, what you are planning, it is genocide. He looked at her with those cold, tired eyes. No, observer. Genocide is what the swarm does. They consume entire civilizations, turn living worlds into dead rocks. We are simply stopping them. By using methods just as terrible, by using methods that work. There is a difference between fighting to conquer and fighting to survive. The swarm wants to consume everything. We just want them to stop. If that requires destroying their ability to make war, then that is what we will do. The attack came exactly on schedule. 3 human strike forces, each one containing the most advanced and deadly ships humanity could deploy. They jumped into swarm space simultaneously, hitting all 3 breeding grounds at once. Velkara watched from Deho's flagship. The first breeding ground appeared on screens, a massive organic structure floating in space. It looked almost beautiful, like a flower made of bone and flesh pulsing with sickly light. Then Yuna's weapons hit it, special munitions designed to burn organic matter, spreading like infection through living tissue. The breeding ground began to die, screaming across frequencies that made Velkara's skin crawl. Swarm defenders swarmed the human ships, thousands of biovessels fighting with desperate fury to protect their breeding ground. But Deho had planned for this. Human ships moved in perfect formation, creating overlapping fields of fire that nothing could survive. It was not a battle, it was an execution. Minji's strike force punched through defensive lines like they were made of paper. She led her ships directly into the heart of the second breeding ground, deploying weapons at point-blank range. Target destroyed, she reported, her voice steady. No survivors. Moving to secondary objectives. Hajun coordinated the third assault with brilliant precision. He had studied swarm defensive patterns for weeks, identifying exactly where they would position reserves. When those reserves moved to intercept, they flew straight into prepared ambushes. Human ships waited in the dark, silent and deadly, then struck without warning. In 6 hours, humanity destroyed what the coalition could not eliminate in months of fighting. 3 breeding grounds burned, tens of thousands of swarm vessels destroyed. The enemy's ability to wage war crippled in a single coordinated strike, but humans did not stop there. They pursued fleeing swarm ships, hunting them down systematically. They destroyed supply depots, resource collection sites, anything that could help the enemy rebuild. They were thorough, efficient, and merciless. Velkara watched it all, unable to look away. She saw the faces of human crew members as they worked. No joy, no celebration, just grim determination and focus. They were not enjoying this. They were simply doing what needed to be done. The most disturbing part was how easily they did it. This level of destruction, this efficiency in killing came naturally to them. Thousands of years of human history had created warriors who understood violence in ways no other species could match. When the last target burned, Deho ordered all ships to rally. Operation Hellfire complete. All vessels returned to base for repairs and resupply. Well done, simple words. No speeches, no grand declarations, just acknowledgement of work completed. That night, Velkara stood at the observation window looking out at the human fleet. Ships bore scars from battle, black marks and holes where armor had been breached, but they remained functional, deadly, ready for the next fight. Admiral Taewon joined her at the window. You understand now? He said quietly. It was not a question. I understand that you are terrifying, Velkara replied. I understand that no species in the galaxy can match humanity in warfare. I understand that you have been holding back this entire time. We did not want this, Taewon said. We joined the coalition hoping to leave our violent past behind. We dreamed of peace, of being more than warriors, but the universe does not always give us what we want. What happens when the war ends? She asked. What happens when you no longer need to fight? Taewon smiled sadly. That is the question humanity has asked itself for thousands of years, observer. We hope someday to find an answer. Below them, human ships moved through the darkness of space, weapons of unimaginable power, wielded by a species that understood war better than any other. And Velkara realized the coalition had not recruited an ally. They had unleashed something far more dangerous. The victory celebrations lasted exactly 1 hour. Then coalition politics destroyed everything. Velkara sat in yet another council meeting, watching species representatives argue about humanity's role in the war. The debates had shifted. No one questioned human effectiveness anymore. Instead, they questioned whether such effectiveness should be allowed to exist. They deployed weapons banned by 17 different galactic conventions, one representative declared. They used psychological warfare against a living species. They showed no mercy, no restraint, no respect for life. They saved our fleets, another countered. They turned the tide of a war we were losing. Would you prefer we all died following your precious conventions? The arguments continued for days. Some species threatened to withdraw from the coalition entirely if humans remained part of military operations. Others insisted human forces were essential to survival. The alliance that had stood for centuries began cracking under the weight of fear and distrust. Meanwhile, Commander Daeho led his fleet deeper into swarm territory. The enemy retreated before them, refusing direct engagement. They had learned. Humanity was too dangerous to fight conventionally, but the swarm was adapting in other ways. Lieutenant Hajun noticed it first. Commander, the swarm is avoiding human ships specifically. They engage coalition forces normally but retreat the moment we arrive. It is like they fear us more than other species. They should fear us, Daeho replied. We have given them good reason. But Hajun looked troubled. Sir, does that not concern you? We have become the monsters they run from. We are the nightmare in the dark. Daeho was silent for a long moment. Yes, Lieutenant. It concerns me greatly. But what choice do we have? We fight the way we were trained to fight. We use the skills our history gave us. Would you prefer we go back to dying politely? No, sir. But I wonder what we are becoming in this war, what it is doing to us. Velkara understood Hajun's fears. She saw the toll this war was taking on human soldiers. They won every battle but celebrated nothing. They saved coalition lives but earned only fear in return. They were magnificent warriors trapped in a role they never wanted. Then Captain Minji's strike team made a discovery that changed everything. Deep in swarm territory, hidden in a dead star system, they found something unexpected. Not a military installation, not a breeding ground, a graveyard of ships, thousands of vessels from a species no one recognized, all destroyed centuries ago, and at the center of it all, a massive organic structure, not swarm design. Something older, something dying. Minji transmitted her findings back to Daeho. Commander, I think we found where the swarm came from. Specialists studied the data. Slowly, a horrible story emerged. The swarm had not always been monsters. Once they were a peaceful civilization facing extinction from a plague. In desperation, they merged their minds together, becoming a collective intelligence to survive. But the hive mind could not stop growing. It consumed their civilization, then reached outward, driven by an endless hunger it could not control. The swarm were not evil. They were victims of their own survival instinct, transformed into a plague themselves. They were trying to save themselves, Specialist Yuna whispered, reviewing the data, just like we would have done. The discovery spread through human forces like a virus. Soldiers who had fought without hesitation suddenly questioned their mission. They had been fighting to survive. But so had the swarm. Two species doing terrible things because they saw no other choice. Admiral Taewon called an emergency meeting. All senior officers gathered, including Velkara as official observer. The room felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. We have a decision to make, Taewon said. Intelligence indicates the swarm's central consciousness is located in this system. One strike could end the war, destroy their core mind, and the entire swarm collapses. He paused, looking at each officer in turn. But we now know they were once like us, a civilization fighting for survival. Do we have the right to exterminate them completely? They have killed billions, someone argued. They have destroyed entire worlds. They must be stopped. We have killed thousands of them, Minji countered quietly. We have burned their breeding grounds, destroyed their ships, hunted them like animals. Are we so different? The room fell silent. These were warriors who had faced death without flinching. But this moral question shook them in ways combat never could. Deho spoke up. We are different because we can choose. The swarm is driven by instinct, by programming they cannot control. We have the ability to show mercy. The question is whether we should. The Coalition wants them destroyed, Hajun said. They made that clear. The Coalition is not here, Taewon replied. We are. This decision belongs to us. Velkara found herself speaking without planning to. All eyes turned to her. I have watched you fight for weeks now. I have seen your capabilities, your ruthlessness, your efficiency. I thought I understood what made you dangerous, but I was wrong. She looked at Taewon. What makes you truly dangerous is not your ability to wage war. It is your ability to choose not to. Any species can destroy. Only the strongest can show restraint when victory is within reach. The room remained quiet. Then Taewon nodded slowly. We will attempt to sever the swarm's connection without destroying them. Specialist Yuna, can you design a weapon that breaks their hive mind but leaves the individuals alive? Yuna thought for a moment. Yes, it will be difficult. Dangerous. We will need to get very close to their central consciousness. But it can be done. Then we do it, Taewon decided. We end this war without committing genocide. We prove that humanity can be better than our worst instincts. But before they could act, disaster struck. Coalition Command, fearing human forces were becoming too independent, withheld critical intelligence about swarm movements. A trap was set and human ships walked straight into it. 3 destroyers were destroyed before they could escape. 200 human soldiers died because the Coalition did not trust them enough to share information. Velkara watched Deho receive the casualty reports. She saw something break behind his eyes. Not rage, something colder. The realization that the species they were protecting feared them more than their mutual enemy. We die for them, he said quietly. We fight their war. We win their battles. And they repay us by withholding intelligence that costs lives. Taewon placed a hand on his shoulder. This is the price we pay, Commander. We chose to help them. We must accept that they will never fully trust us. Our history follows us like a shadow. Is it worth it? Deho asked. Is saving them worth losing ourselves? That is not for me to decide. Each of us must answer that question alone. That night, Velkara attended a memorial service for the fallen human soldiers. The ceremony was simple and profound. Each name was read aloud, each life acknowledged. No grand speeches. No political statements. Just remembrance. She watched human soldiers cry openly. These warriors who faced death without fear wept for their lost companions, and she understood something fundamental about humanity. They were not heartless killing machines. They were people who had learned to do terrible things because survival demanded it. They carried the weight of every life they took, every battle they fought, every victory they won, and somehow, despite everything, they still hoped to be better than their past. The final battle was coming. One last confrontation that would decide the fate of the galaxy. And Velkara knew that whatever happened next would determine not just the war's outcome, but humanity's place in the universe forever. The final message from Admiral Taewon reached Coalition Command at dawn. This is Admiral Taewon of the United Human Defense Fleet. We are withdrawing from Coalition Command structure effective immediately. We will finish this war on our terms. When it is done, we will discuss our future relationship with the Council. Until then, stay out of our way. The Council erupted in outrage. Human forces breaking away was exactly what they feared. An independent human military answering to no one, pursuing their own objectives. The nightmare scenario, but there was nothing they could do. Human ships were already moving, executing a battle plan developed in secret over weeks of preparation. The largest coordinated assault in human history was underway. Velkara remained aboard Deho's flagship, her official observer status meaningless now. She was simply a witness to whatever was about to happen. You did not have to do this, she said to Taewon. Breaking from the Coalition will make everything worse. The old admiral looked tired but determined. They were never going to trust us, observer. Better to finish this war properly than continue fighting with one hand tied behind our backs. We will prove we can win and still maintain our humanity. And if you cannot, then we will have to live with that failure. But we will try. Every human vessel in the sector gathered for the final push. Thousands of ships, from massive carriers to small strike craft. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Not for conquest, not for glory. Just to end a war that should never have lasted this long. Commander Deho stood at the command deck surrounded by his officers. Lieutenant Hajun worked tactical displays with steady hands. Specialist Yuna monitored her custom weapon systems. Captain Minji led the vanguard forces, ready to punch through any defense. All ships report ready, Commander, Hajun announced. Deho took a deep breath. Then let us finish this. All vessels jump on my mark. Target swarm central consciousness. Rules of engagement: neutralize, not exterminate. We break their hive mind but leave the individuals alive. This is not a war of extinction. This is liberation. The fleet jumped. Thousands of ships appearing simultaneously in the heart of swarm territory, surrounding the massive organic structure that housed their collective intelligence. The swarm responded instantly. Every ship, every weapon, every organism in the system converged on the human fleet. It was the largest concentration of swarm forces ever seen. Hundreds of thousands of bio-vessels swarming like angry insects. But humans had planned for this. They knew the swarm would throw everything at them. They had prepared for overwhelming numbers, for desperate tactics, for an enemy fighting for survival. The battle began with coordinated precision. Human ships moved as one organism, creating overlapping defensive fields that nothing could penetrate. They did not spread out or break formation. They moved together, supporting each other, creating an impenetrable wall of steel and fire. This is what we were made for, Hajun said quietly, watching the perfect coordination unfold. Not just fighting, but fighting together, trusting each other completely. Minji's strike force carved a path through swarm defenses. Her ships moved like dancers, graceful and deadly. Every shot counted, every maneuver precise. No wasted effort, no unnecessary destruction, just professional, efficient warfare. The central consciousness tried everything to stop them. Suicide runs that human shields absorbed without breaking. Bioweapons that human countermeasures neutralized. Coordinated attacks that human tactical systems predicted and countered before they developed. Thousands of years of human military. Evolution had created warriors who understood combat on a level no other species could match. They had fought each other for so long, they knew every trick, every strategy, every desperate tactic an enemy might use. Yuna monitored her specialized weapon. Approaching optimal range, Commander. The device is ready. Hold until Minji's team reaches the central structure, Deho ordered. We need to be close enough for precision deployment. Minji's voice came through clear and calm despite the chaos around her. Approaching target. 3 minutes to deployment position. They are throwing everything at us, but we are holding. Velkara watched human ships take damage but keep fighting. She saw vessels that should have retreated hold their positions. Crews that should have panicked maintain perfect discipline. A species that could have chosen destruction choosing restraint instead. In position, Minji reported. Ready for weapon deployment. Specialist Yuna, you may fire when ready. Yuna hesitated for just a moment. This will hurt them. Breaking a hive mind is not gentle. Neither is remaining trapped in one, Deho replied. Fire, the weapon deployed. Not a bomb, not a missile. A specialized pulse designed to sever the connections binding the swarm consciousness together. It spread through their collective mind like a wave, breaking links, freeing individuals from the hive. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Swarm ships stopped attacking. Their perfect coordination shattered into confusion. Thousands of individual organisms suddenly aware of themselves for the first time in centuries. Some died immediately, unable to function without the hive mind. Others drifted, lost and terrified. But many survived, freed from the collective that had consumed their ancestors. All ships cease fire, Deho ordered. Begin rescue and recovery operations. They are no longer our enemies. Human vessels immediately shifted from combat to humanitarian mode. Medical ships moved forward. Rescue teams deployed. Engineers worked to stabilize drifting bioships. The same warriors who had fought so ruthlessly moments before now worked just as hard to save lives. Velkara watched in amazement. This was the true measure of humanity. Not their capacity for violence, but their ability to switch from warrior to caregiver in seconds. Their willingness to help even former enemies. "The war is over," Taewon said quietly, standing beside her. "We did it without genocide. We broke them without destroying them. We proved we could be better than our history. What happens now?" Velkara asked. "Now we see if the coalition can accept us, if they can look past their fear and see what we really are. Not monsters. Just people who survived by learning to fight." Days later, the Coalition Council met to discuss humanity's future. Velkara presented her final report, not the one she had planned to write, not a clinical assessment of military capabilities, but something far more important. "I came to observe primitive warriors," she told the council. "I found something far more complex. A species that understands violence because they have no choice. A people who wage war with terrifying efficiency but never lose sight of their humanity. They frighten us because they can destroy us easily, but they also saved us. They won a war we were losing. And they did it without becoming the monsters we feared. They showed restraint when annihilation was easier. They chose mercy when genocide was within reach." She looked at each council member. "My recommendation is not restrictions or oversight. It is trust. Give humanity the respect they have earned. Accept them as full partners, not dangerous tools to be controlled. They have proven they can be unleashed without losing themselves. That is worth more than any weapon system." The vote was close. Some species would never overcome their fear. But enough chose trust. Enough chose hope. Humanity was granted full membership in the coalition with complete autonomy over their military forces. Velkara returned to Bastion 7 one final time. She found Admiral Taewon at his usual place, staring out at the stars. "Congratulations, Admiral. You got what you wanted," he smiled sadly. "Did we? We are still warriors in a galaxy that wants peace. We are still defined by our ability to destroy. That will never change." "Perhaps," Velkara said, "but you proved something important. You proved that strength and mercy can exist together. That those who know war best can also work hardest for peace. I hope you are right, Observer. For all our sakes." Below them, human ships moved through space, still dangerous, still deadly, but controlled, directed, in service of something greater than themselves. Velkara had come expecting to document primitive warriors. Instead, she had witnessed something unprecedented, a species that had mastered the art of war and chose to use that mastery in service of peace. She thought she knew war, thought she understood violence and power, but she had been wrong. She knew nothing until she witnessed humanity unchained, a species that could be unleashed like a storm but remained in control of themselves. Warriors who fought not because they loved war, but because they loved those they protected. The galaxy would never see humans the same way again. They would always carry fear alongside respect. But that was acceptable. Better to be feared and trusted than loved and weak. Humanity had proven what they were. Not monsters, not saviors, simply the most dangerous species in the galaxy who chose to use their power wisely. And that, Velkara thought, was exactly what the universe needed. Someone who understood war well enough to prevent it.